Hello, I'm Donald Messer, the president of the Iliff School of Theology. And with me today is my friend and colleague, Alberta Iliff Shattuck. Glad to have you here today to share with us the story of the Iliff School of Theology as it relates to the Iliff family. Alberta, it would be good for you to share with us something of your memories and your perspectives on that relationship of the Iliff family and the Iliff School of Theology.
Thank you. Well, as Dr. Messer has said, we've had a close relationship with the Iliff School of Theology. I think mine probably began when I was baptized in the lovely Iliff Chapel as an infant. The school was built in memory of my grandfather, John Wesley Iliff, who had expressed the desire that there be a seminary in this area so that young men would not have to go either to the Midwest or to the Pacific Coast in order to get theological training. John Wesley Iliff was born in McLooney, Perry County, Ohio, in December of 1831. He came from a good Methodist heritage, as you would know from his name. His father had given property to the town of McLooney in order for a Methodist church to be built there. John attended Ohio Wesleyan University. In 1857, his father wanted him to accept some of his property for a farm, but John preferred to go west to Ohio City, Kansas, along with some other Ohio residents. There he bought property, built a store, and sold merchandise to residents. He was there for 2 years, and then after gold was discovered in Colorado, he moved on to the Denver area, where with 2 other men, he also set up a store. They sold merchandise to the men flocking to the gold fields of Colorado. He took in trail-weary cattle in return for merchandise and turned them loose on property that he had bought along the Platte River north of Denver. He found that they wintered very well on the Native American grasses and decided that he would go into the cattle business. So he sold out his interest in the store and then made arrangements with Goodnight to bring cattle up from Texas. He acquired quite a bit of property along the Platte River from homesteaders who had found that the 160 acres allotment was not enough to support them or their families in this arid country. He turned the, of course it was open range, so the cattle ranged all along the Platte River. Ultimately, he had 9 cow camps, and his cattle ranged from north of Denver up into the Wyoming border. He decided to go back in the fall of 1864 to Ohio City, where he, in January, married Sarah Elizabeth Smith, who was also an Ohioan who had come out at the same time with her family, at the same time that he had. They returned back to Denver area and lived on one of the ranches. She returned in the fall of that year to give birth to a son, William Seward Iliff, my father. He was born October 20th, 1865, and unfortunately she had developed uremic poisoning and only survived him by 2 months. John left the small child with the Smith grandparents and returned to his work in Colorado. However, when the boy he moved his headquarters to Cheyenne in 1867, and when they brought the young boy out with him because he was afraid that the grandparents might spoil the infant. He made frequent trips to Denver, and Elizabeth Sarah Frazier was sent to Denver by stagecoach to represent the Singer sewing machine. They both resided at the Placer Hotel in downtown Denver. She returned to Chicago and became treasurer of the Singer Sewing Machine Company. However, in 1870, John moved on to Chicago, and they were married in the spring of 1870. He brought her back to Cheyenne, and there a daughter, Edna, was born. However, Wyoming had declared women's suffrage, and as the Union Pacific was pushing its rails west, Elizabeth was afraid that she might be locked up with some of the questionable followers of the railroad. So she persuaded her husband to move to Denver, which they did, and there a daughter, Louise Iliff, was born. Was born in 1875. In 1877, a son, John Wesley Jr., was born. And it was just at that time that his father was taken ill and while he was on a cattle trip south, but he came back and he lived until February 9th, 1878. Unfortunately, the infant, John Wesley Jr., developed diphtheria and died in the spring of 1879. In 1880, after his death, after John Wesley's death, his wife Elizabeth carried on the business, and she was an excellent businesswoman, and she engaged the Snyder brothers to run the cattle business for her. In 18 I have to stop and think of the time. In 1880, Bishop Henry White Warren of Atlanta came to Colorado in order to climb Mount Elbert. He and Elizabeth met, and they were married in December of 1883. He had been quite a builder. He was very interested in education, and he had been quite instrumental in setting up the Gammon School in Atlanta. He moved his episcopate to Denver, and when the University of Denver moved from its downtown campus out to University Park, he and his wife decided that it would be excellent to fund a school of the University of Denver, so they founded the Iliff School of Theology. My father promised to give a building up to $50,000 for the school, and ultimately it cost him $56,000. So the Iliff School was built at the same time as the University of Denver. In 1897, my father married a young woman from Trinidad, Alberta Bloom, And the daughter, Edna, married the dean of the Iliff School of Theology, Arthur H. Briggs, a little earlier that spring. However, there were financial difficulties, and so in 1900 the school closed because they simply did not have the funds to fund the salaries of the professors. In 1903, the campus of the university was split down the middle, and the Iliff School became autonomous, completely separated from the University of Denver. Bishop and his wife Elizabeth and my father and Louise Iliff had served as trustees of the school and continued to do so after it was separated from DU. The school reopened in 1910, and they both continued to serve as trustees to the end of each of their lives. My Aunt Louise was very interested in the school. In fact, it was really her whole life. She was very devoted to it, and eventually became an honorary trustee after she lost her eyesight. My father continued as a trustee till he died in 1846, and then my brother Seward, who was living in the Denver area, was asked to serve in his place. My brother Wesley was living on the East Coast. Seward served until he was called up for Army duty and found he could not attend trustee meetings. So he resigned, and at that point in 1958, I was asked to serve as a trustee. When Seward, after retirement from his service in the Army, Seward also served as a trustee until his death. I continued with the necessary hiatus until 1992, when my brother Seward's younger daughter Suzanne began to service as a trustee. So we have had quite a long interest and engagement in the school, and I'm sure the bishop would be very pleased if he knew where it stands today.
That was a splendid summary of a magnificent history of the Iliff family and the Iliff School of Theology. I'd like to just ask you a few more informal kinds of questions. You have an earned doctorate yourself and have a great commitment to education. What has meant the most to you about being a trustee now for 40 years at Iliff School of Theology?
Well, I think the association with it and to see how it has developed over the years has just been very gratifying, and knowing a little bit of what my grandfather, what my step-grandfather, Bishop Warren, would have liked. I think he just would be very pleased, and as I am, with the way it has developed.
One of the points you made early on, that the school was established because men going into ministry had to go east for studies. The school was always open to women, but until recent times it did not have a very large enrollment. What has been your thoughts about seeing the change in enrollment over these many years?
Well, it's been very interesting to see the change, and I think the bishop would have been interested in that. I think he was ahead of his times in his interest and in his liberal attitude. And I am old-fashioned enough that I like men in the pulpit, but I found some very fine women in the pulpit too.
You mentioned that Iliff came to Denver in part because the fear that might get locked up in jury duty, and so we ended up here in part because of the women's suffrage movement. Do you have any more comments you'd like to make about the importance of that move from Cheyenne to Denver?
I think I am interested that she was concerned about serving on jury duty, but I also think that she would be probably accepted the suffrage very readily when it was established in Colorado. I understand that Colorado was the first state to have women's suffrage, although because Wyoming, it was still Wyoming territory when they established it.
What has been some of your objectives as a trustee and your working relationship? What are the areas of greatest interest to you personally?
Well, I have served on the Academic Affairs Committee, and with some of my contact in earlier days out at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, serving as a there in a small teaching capacity. I think that that has been the area that I am most interested in is the academic affairs.
As a committed Christian and churchwoman, you made mention to the fact that Iliff had a liberal tradition from the very beginning. How have you understood that tradition, and what does it mean to you today?
Well, I think it's on the forefront of the changes that are occurring in the country and in the world, and I think it's very good that it is able to show the diversity that it is showing and the steps that it has taken.
Your father died in 1946, and your brother and you both served on this board. This room where we're taping this conversation is been recently built and dedicated to the Iliff family as a gift from the Iliff family. This is really a rich heritage, and I know that you are hoping that connections will continue into the future. What are some of your dreams for the school as it moves into the 21st century?
Well, I'd like to see it continue on its present course, and I've been very pleased at the continuing education that it is promoting, which I think is very important in order to have pastors keep up with the times.
This building that your father built was really a mile-high building, built at the very spot that is a mile high in Denver, and it's been a beacon to the city and to the country, and we hope the world. Thank you, Alberta, for sharing in such a splendid way today about the Iliff family and its unique and significant relationship to the Iliff School of Theology. Truly, you're a remarkable person. You and your family have given dedicated and distinguished service to this school since 1892, and your 40 years of service is especially magnificent in the way that you have related to the school and given of yourself and your resources so generously over this period of time. The Iliff family began with its vision in the 19th century, and throughout the 20th century have worked to ensure that the Iliff School of Theology was truly a school of excellence, outstanding in its service to the community and the world. Now, as the school moves into the 21st century, it is prepared to educate future generations of leaders for service to the church and world.